The applause hadn't even faded. My name still shimmered in gold on the ballroom screen, floating just above the words, Strategic Excellence Award. I was still gripping the crystal trophy when Dalton Reese, our sleek new CEO, stepped onto the stage. One final round of applause for Denise Rowen, he said, raising his glass. The mind behind 3 of the most groundbreaking partnerships in Briar and Nash's history. I stood breath-shallow fingers curled around the base of the award. My name was etched into it deep permanent, like I thought my place here was. And tonight, Dalton continued, pausing with a smile too smooth to trust, we not only honor Denise, we also say farewell. The room tensed. A ripple of confused laughter scattered across the tables. Someone whispered, "Is this real?" Dalton didn't blink. Effective immediately, Denise will be leaving Briar and Nash as part of our leadership realignment. I didn't move. Couldn't. From the front row, a fork clattered to the floor. One of the HR directors looked like she'd swallowed glass. But the string quartet kept playing. And then the screen behind me changed. My name disappeared. A video began, soft piano stock footage, handshake montages. Then her face appeared, smiling, grinning with Dalton. The caption read, "Meet our new head of strategic alliances, Marla James." I stared. Marla, a mid-level manager from our Seattle office. Friendly, inexperienced. I had mentored her for years. No explanation, no warning. Just a pre-filmed tribute airing behind me like I had never existed. I was still holding the award when Dalton raised his glass again. "Here's to bold transitions," he said, and walked off stage, leaving me alone, lit up like a relic. And that's when I understood this wasn't sloppy. It was choreographed. From the tribute to the timing. The smirk he gave me as he stepped off stage. I wasn't being honored. I was being erased. Beautifully. Publicly. Not a soul in the room objected. That night, I learned applause doesn't always mean respect. Sometimes it's just relief that you're finally leaving. I didn't cry, didn't yell, didn't throw the award in Dalton's face. I just smiled, the kind you wear when you're surrounded by sharks and refuse to bleed. This wasn't betrayal with a knife in the back. This was a toast with wine in one hand and a knife to the throat. And the planning had just begun. Our white whale. I brought in $480 million in new strategic partnerships in under 1 quarter. That kind of growth doesn't happen by accident. It takes instinct, leverage, and trust. And I had all 3. Dalton smiled through every press interview like he'd done it all himself. But backstage, as the applause faded and the stage lights cooled, that grin made perfect sense. It was victory for him. I stepped into the hallway, away from the echo of champagne flutes and hollow praise, and opened my phone. I wanted to check tomorrow's calendar client follow-ups, final contracts, a 7 a.m. call with Zurich. Instead, I saw a new message. Subject, System Deactivation. Notification timestamp. 2 days ago. Dear Ms. Rowen, as per executive directive, your Briar and Nash email, internal calendar, and systems access were revoked as of 6:30 a.m. on Tuesday. This is part of your upcoming transition and will remain in effect. 2 days ago, they cut me out before the award, before the toast, before the performance. I was already gone. I stared at the screen, my chest burning, not from confusion, from clarity. This wasn't last minute. It was scripted. My access revoked, my replacement filmed, the tribute cued. Everything timed to make it feel clean, polished, celebratory. Dalton never intended to keep me. He just needed my name on the deals. My reputation to open the doors, then shut me out before I got too recognized. Too powerful. And the part that stung wasn't that he used me. It's that I let him. That night, back in my hotel room, the award still untouched in its velvet box, I sat on the edge of the bed, replaying every moment. The smirks, the screen, his voice echoing, "Here's to bold transitions." But what he didn't know, I had already made mine. Nearly a year before Dalton stepped into Briar and Nash, I was negotiating with Eclipse Renewables, a tricky clean tech firm, with a notoriously guarded CFO, Angela Cruz. Over coffee, she said, "I don't trust corporations. I trust people." So I asked her for one line, a key person clause giving her the right to terminate if I was removed without cause. She signed it. So did the CEOs at Redmark Logistics and Travell Trust, each with similar terms hidden in plain sight. No one asked questions, not even Dalton. He was too busy chasing headlines. And in doing so, he signed his own collapse. Just quiet contingencies tied to one quiet name, Denise Rowen. Dalton signed all three. In his rush to make headlines and spike Briar and Nash's stock before the next quarterly board meeting, he didn't even blink at the fine print. He just wanted the deals public. Fast. And they were. The media cheered, the board clapped, the numbers soared. But real power doesn't live in headlines. It lives in footnotes, in clauses no one notices until it's too late. And that night from my hotel room, PDFs open on my personal laptop, stored in a cloud Dalton didn't know existed. I smiled. Not out of revenge. Not yet. Just quiet satisfaction. He thought removing me would be clean. Silent. But in doing so, he lit a fuse. And those contracts, they weren't his to keep. I didn't cry when I got home. Not because it didn't sting, it did. The humiliation clung to me like red wine on silk, impossible to scrub. But I'd already given Dalton enough for one night. He hadn't earned my tears. The city outside still buzzed, oblivious to the fact that everything I'd built over 8 years had just been ripped away in front of my colleagues, the press, in a ballroom full of catered praise. I slipped off my heels, undid the clasp of the award, placed it face down on the counter. Strategic excellence. Denise Rowen. Funny how recognition always shows up right before erasure. Then I walked to my desk, opened the drawer, powered on the laptop Dalton never knew about. The screen lit up with a quiet pulse. Verdon Rowen Group. Not a shell. Not a someday dream. A fully registered consulting firm with Federal ID Massachusetts business license, EIN, and active tax filings. It had been real for 6 months, but its soul had formed much earlier. Back when I first noticed Dalton shrinking my visibility, pulling me from meetings, excluding me from deals, I didn't protest. I documented. I prepared. Because when power shifts, you don't beg for your seat back. You build a better table. Verdon Rowen Group wasn't revenge. It was insurance. A soft landing for when the axe finally dropped. I leaned back, staring at the name. Verdon. No for Northwell Energy. Ver for Veritas Logistics. Dan for Danbridge Capital. 3 firms who had trusted me, not the brand. Me. And now, those quiet contracts were already waking up. But even then, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. Because this wasn't retaliation. It was a transition I had engineered precise, measured, down to the hour. Let the industry spin whatever version they wanted. That I'd quit. That I was replaced. That I disappeared. If you found power in quiet strength and believe every ending is just the start of a better chapter, subscribe to the channel because the next story, it might just be yours. And trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. The truth would travel quietly, beneath the surface. Denise Rowen hadn't vanished. She'd changed uniforms. It was still dark when the call came. I'd fallen asleep, fully dressed, slouched on the edge of my couch. The faint glow of my second laptop blinked on the coffee table, Verdon Rowen Group's dashboard, still open, alive, pulsing like a steady heartbeat. The apartment was still, the streets below silent. Then somewhere between dream and waking, my phone vibrated against the glass. 4:30 a.m., not a text, not an alert, a direct call. I almost didn't answer. After everything that night had become, I wasn't ready for sympathy wrapped in fake concern. But then I saw the name Angela Cruz, the CFO of Eclipse Renewables, one of the sharpest minds I'd ever negotiated with, and not someone who wasted words. I answered on the first ring. "Denise?" she said, voice calm and alert, like she'd already had her coffee. I take it you're no longer with Briar and Nash? I exhaled. That's correct. We figured it was coming. No apology. No sorrow. Just clarity. She'd seen power shift before. She knew what it looked like. We've been watching, she continued. The reorganized meetings, the contract delays, the optics. Frankly, I expected them to hold on to you longer. But ego makes smart men careless. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Her words confirmed what I'd only dared think alone. Then came the pivot. We're done with Briar and Nash? Angela said. You already knew that. A pause. What I need to know is, are you ready to lead? I looked around at the contracts on the table, at the glowing screen, at the late-night notes written in private faith. Yes, I said. No doubt. No disclaimers. Good, she replied. Legal will reach out before 8. We'd like to be your first client. I closed my eyes, not in disbelief, in relief. This wasn't rebellion. It wasn't revenge. It was recognition. The rarest currency in the corporate world, being seen for who you are, not just what they used you for. And the first domino had just asked me to lead. It was a little past noon when I returned to Briar and Nash. The scent of polished wood and stale coffee still clung to the glass walls just as it had for years. But none of it felt the same. The building that had once been a battlefield now felt like a mausoleum, a quiet monument to what I'd built and what they discarded. I didn't want to go back, but there were papers to sign. Severance, legal releases, non-compete clauses written by people who thought I still needed them. I wasn't sure I'd even read them, but I knew I needed something else more than closure. I needed to see it with my own eyes. The floor I used to command, the rooms where I turned impossible deals into handshakes, the office that had once belonged to me. I stepped into the elevator. The gears hummed with a kind of tension, like even the building knew something was ending. The doors opened on the executive floor. Familiar silence, familiar desks. A few junior analysts glanced up from their screens but quickly looked away. No one said anything. I didn't expect them to. Some things are only noticed by the quiet ones. I walked down the hall, past the boardroom, past the mural I'd fought to keep during the last renovation. Then I stopped. My office door. The gold letters were gone. In their place, a new name. A name I didn't recognize. The door was half open. A young woman sat confidently behind the desk, blazer sleeves pushed to her elbows, laughing lightly into a headset. One hand rested on the desk I used to anchor during 18-hour strategy sessions. She was settled in, already owning the space. Natalie Hurst, her nameplate read, probably no more than 28. I didn't know her, and clearly she didn't know me. I stood there for a moment, just long enough to feel the ache bloom in my chest. It wasn't rage or bitterness, just a quiet grief. The kind that comes after the fight is already over. I turned, not in defeat, but in understanding. The seat was never mine to keep, only mine to shape until they replaced the shape. And the ache that would fade in time. A quiet table by the window, second floor of a small cafe in Boston's Back Bay I'd used for years during client offsites. No nameplate, no corner office politics. Just a window view of Boylston Street and a plate of lemon-roasted salmon I didn't taste. My mind was elsewhere, but my posture, composed, deliberate, exactly how I wanted it. The phone buzzed once, then again, and then a third time, followed by one long vibration that could only mean one thing. Something had snapped. I turned it over. 3 new messages. One from Briar and Nash's executive thread. One from a former colleague I hadn't heard from since the layoffs. And one from Angela Cruz. Subject, clause, 14C action executed. I didn't open it. Instead, I took a slow sip of coffee. Let 10 full seconds pass. This wasn't a surprise. It was the next programmed move in a sequence I designed months ago, one that would only trigger if I was removed without cause. And now, precisely at 2:00 p.m., Eclipse Renewables' legal team had delivered the kill shot, not to Dalton, but to Chairman Leonard Broderick, the head of Briar and Nash's board, A direct, clean, and silent contract withdrawal. No PR spin, no phone call, no warning. Just a stamped letter delivered by counsel. Due to violation of Clause 14C regarding key personnel removal without cause, Eclipse Renewables is terminating all contractual obligations with Briar and Nash effective immediately. All transition assets on hold. Pending further review, 3 sentences, and it cut $122 million from Briar and Nash's projected revenue. I leaned back, phone face up on the table, and smiled not out of vengeance, but out of precision. This was never about noise or ego. It was about architecture, systems, quiet leverage. Dalton had mistaken my silence for surrender, my restraint for weakness. What he never understood, what so many never do, is that some of us aren't chasing the next title. We're laying the groundwork for a future they won't see coming. Across the river, chaos was blooming. Legal scrambling, PR drafting statements, Dalton pacing in confusion. Because this wasn't about market trends or budget cuts. This was personal, and worse for him, it hadn't come through him. The board had been blindsided. That was the scar that would last. And I hadn't even touched the boardroom door. The world was finally catching up to what I'd known for months. Power doesn't always scream. Sometimes it moves in silence, leaving collapse in its wake without ever raising its voice. It was 10:15 a.m. when the delivery arrived. I was still unpacking boxes in the corner office of a co-working loft I'd rented in Boston's Leather District. It wasn't glamorous. The ceiling pipes were exposed, the walls needed paint, and the air conditioner wheezed like a tired harmonica. But it was mine. I had just finished assembling my desk walnut slab-brushed steel legs when the receptionist walked in holding a thick envelope. "Delivery for Ms. Rowen," she said, offering it with a knowing smile. No return address, no note. Just a cream-colored envelope with my name written in deliberate penmanship. I opened it carefully. Inside was a letter on thick linen stock. Veritas Logistics across the top. To Denise Rowen, CEO, Verdun Rowen Group. I froze. My breath held. Not Briar and Nash. Not former executive. Not even consultant. Verdun Rowen Group. Already signed. Already sealed. No red lines. No back and forth. Just one quiet sentence. Veritas Logistics requests continuation of strategic contract under original liaison. Now operating through Verdun Rowen Group. That was it. No legalese. No questions. Just trust. Silent, swift allegiance. They hadn't asked. They had simply followed. Then I saw the second item, a small velvet box. I hesitated, unsure, then opened it slowly. Inside, the gold watch I'd given Marcus Yates, Veritas CEO, after we'd closed the contract last year. A private gesture after 6 months of meticulous negotiation. It had been engraved then with for time, well invested. Now beneath the clasp, in faint script, "You gave us time." Now, we return it. I sat down. The weight of it all finally settled, not heavy, not painful. Just full. Not applause, not noise, dignity. I hadn't forced this. I hadn't begged. I hadn't spoken to Marcus since I was fired, and yet here he was, choosing to follow that silence. It was louder than any headline. Across the river, Dalton was likely in emergency meetings, his team scrambling, PR choking on optics. But me, I was placing the letter beside my Verdun binder and tucking the watch back into its box, not to wear, not yet, just to remember that sometimes the most powerful echo is the one no one hears. And above all, my name. At 6:30 a.m., my phone buzzed. A single new email from a name I hadn't seen in nearly 7 months. Dalton Reese, Briar Nash. Com. Subject private and confidential, a way forward. I didn't open it. Not right away. I just stared at it while sipping my tea sunlight, slowly cutting through the blinds of my new office. Nothing flashy, but real, grounded. Verdun Rowen Group was still small, still growing, but the energy, it was focused, intentional, alive. I set the cup down. Clicked. Denise, I've had time to reflect on recent events. I'd like to begin with a sincere acknowledgement. The transition was mishandled. I now recognize how poorly it was executed. Briar Nash is at a critical inflection point. You remain a key voice in this industry, and your influence with former partners is clear. I'd like to offer you a path back, executive-level, leadership direct reporting to the board, not through me, equity participation, full client portfolio reinstated. Let's reset the conversation. I believe we're stronger as allies than adversaries. Dalton Reese, CEO, Briar Nash. It was exactly what I expected, polished. And too late. Dalton didn't believe in apologies. He believed in control. And when he lost it, he tried to repackage my return as the solution to his crisis. Reset the conversation. Quiet return, not accountability. Just desperation dressed in diplomacy. But I no longer needed to be in the room to be heard. Outside my office door, I heard soft footsteps. Talia! My operations lead walked by with 2 cappuccinos. She paused. You okay? She asked, eyes flicking to the screen. I turned the laptop slightly. Let her read the subject line. Her brow lifted. Is that who I think it is? I nodded. She gave a low whistle. That man has some nerve. I smiled faintly, said nothing. She handed me the coffee and kept walking. I read the message again and again. Then with no ceremony, I opened my email settings and created a new auto response. This account no longer exists. No need for reply, no need for anger, just absence, the kind that echoes louder than outrage. I clicked save, archived the message, closed the laptop, and outside my window the city kept rising, just like I had. Spin calls with select journalists, carefully curated leadership transparency memos. One of them sent to the entire Briar Nash team titled Strengthening Values During Transition. It read like it had been ghost-written by PR interns. No substance, no accountability, just recycled buzzwords and corporate haze. But no amount of messaging could stop what came next. At 9:15 a.m., my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen in years, Maya Hensley, senior correspondent, East Coast Business Review. I remembered Maya well, sharp as a blade, with a reputation for cutting through image to get to intent. She didn't cover fluff. She profiled power. Her stories didn't fade, they redefined reputations. We'd last spoken years ago at a Columbia panel on ethical leadership. She'd asked hard questions even then. So I knew this wasn't a casual message. Her note was short, check the front page, print and digital. We followed the breadcrumbs. You should see it before Dalton does. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. I opened the ECBR site. The headline was already trending, The Quiet Architect How Denise Rowen built Verdun Rowen Group while still at Briar Nash. And why it was all legal. My heart stayed steady. My breath didn't waver. The article opened with a retelling of my exit, the client fallout, the eerie silence that followed. But then it pivoted. Maya had done the work, spoken to my former attorney, dug through the business filings, interviewed people I hadn't seen in years. She mapped out the creation of Verdun from 6 months before I was fired, built on weekends, personal time, no company assets, no conflicts of interest, every document time-stamped, every clause legally reviewed, and then buried in the third section a single line. She didn't break the system. She simply outgrew it. 10 words that undid every whisper campaign. I hadn't gone rogue. I'd just been ready. Talia burst into my office with her tablet. Have you seen this? I nodded once. You look calm. I said, scrolling slowly. It's not news to me. It's just news to them. Marcus appeared in the doorway. Investor line just doubled. Veritas wants to quote the piece in their annual letter. I smiled. No tweets, no posts, I said. Let the story speak. Silence already won. Twitter. And inboxes across the country. The part of me that once craved recognition no longer needed it. The truth had found its way into the light, not because I shouted, but because I earned it. It didn't hit the headlines immediately. The first signs were subtle. A few missed investor updates, a cryptic memo from the Briar and Nash board chair, a mysteriously canceled earnings call. But those of us seasoned in the game, we recognized the symptoms. Briar and Nash was spiraling, and Dalton Reese had run out of mirrors to deflect the collapse. By the end of the week, the firm's valuation dropped 39%. Analysts pulled their coverage. Clients froze renewals. Entire internal teams stopped responding to management altogether. And then, late Thursday night, a one-line statement surfaced. The board has convened an executive session regarding urgent leadership matters. No name, no apology. But we all knew. I was still at the Rowen office when Talia forwarded the internal memo leaked to the Boston Ledger. Nearly midnight. I stayed behind. Not out of necessity, out of choice. Freedom on my terms had become its own form of authority. The subject line read, "It's happening." Inside was confirmation. Emergency board vote. Agenda executive termination. Dalton Reese. No press call, no town hall. Just 10 directors lit by laptop screens finally acknowledging the truth. The man they once worshipped had dragged them into disgrace. Dalton didn't speak, just stared into the camera, jaw tight. 7 votes to remove. 3 abstained. None defended him. He signed the release and logged off without a word. No farewell. No LinkedIn post. No glossy exit. By morning, his name was gone from the leadership page, replaced with interim assigned. And that name? David Lang. The same analyst I had introduced to Briar's board over a year ago. Back when they wanted a quiet consultant to assess structural risk. Dalton dismissed him, said he was too rigid. The board overrode him. David listened, took notes, stayed steady while Dalton unraveled. Now he was leading. Talia came in with coffee, her smile somewhere between awe and vindication. "Check the news," she asked. I nodded. "He's gone." And in my inbox that afternoon, a quiet note. "Thank you, Denise. I never forgot who saw me first. Let's talk industry to industry. What you're building matters. David." And I believed him. I stared at the message for a while, letting it settle. Not because I wanted anything from David, but because the arc had completed itself. The man they protected, Dalton, had vanished in silence. And the one I had quietly backed, he was leading now. And me, I wasn't going back. I wasn't patching up what they broke. I was building something cleaner, clearer, from scratch, from scars, from stillness. And that more than any retribution was all the closure I ever needed. The room was still when I stepped onto the stage. Not quiet, still, like air, holding its breath before a summer storm. The kind of stillness that doesn't demand attention, but earns it. It had been 6 months since Briar and Nash scraped my name from their executive registry. But today, my name was printed in bold, unmistakable font. Rowen Group, Public Launch and Partner Summit. The venue wasn't flashy. A renovated carriage house in the South End. Warm brick, oak floors, low amber lighting, no sterile conference room, no LED stage wash. Just presence. Seats were filled with investors, colleagues, former rivals, journalists, even a few former Briar clients. Not all friendly, but all paying attention. I took the mic with no script. Just a small note card in my pocket, untouched. "My name is Denise Rowen," I said, "and I want to begin by saying what this isn't." The room leaned in. This isn't a takedown or a tech disruption with a headline pitch. Verdun wasn't born from bitterness. It was born from the absence of integrity. Pause. Let it sink. We're not here to compete. We're here to correct. That was the moment. Behind me, the curtain lifted. 3 familiar silhouettes stepped forward. Alex Kim, director at Halberg, Nina Desai, CIO of Eastvale Equity, and David Lang. No applause, no theatrics, just silent affirmation. People stood slowly. A wave, not a rush. At the back, I saw a veteran consultant lower her phone, eyes glassy. Talia gripped Marcus's sleeve near the soundboard. They looked at me like I had nothing left to prove, but proved it anyway. The screen lit up. No logo, no sound. Just white text on black. They thought they ended you. But really, they launched you. That was the moment I felt it. Not revenge, release. I built something in silence because I wasn't given the space to speak. But now I stand here, not just as a woman who was dismissed, overlooked, and erased, but as someone who turned that silence into strategy. And if any part of my story resonated with you, if you've ever been cast aside after years of loyalty, told you were non-essential, or seen someone else take credit for what you built, then I want to hear from you. Leave me a comment. Tell me what part of this story made you pause. Share your own story. Let others in this community know they're not alone, because they're not. And if you believe that quiet power, resilience, and reinvention matter, support this channel. It's not just about me. It's about all of us who were told to step aside and decided instead to step up. Here's what I've learned. You don't need a headline to make an impact. You don't need a title to hold power. You need clarity, integrity, and the courage to walk away from rooms that no longer recognize your worth and to build your own brick by brick. To anyone out there still fighting silently, you're not behind. You're just preparing. If you found strength in this story, hit the like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe for more stories like mine. Real, quiet, strong, because maybe the next story I tell is yours. And I can't wait to see how you rise. Thank you for watching, and thank you truly for listening. Denise Rowen, founder, Verdon Rowen Group,